And we welcome you here on stage at our powwow at the ITB.
Is this even work? Okay, here we go. Turn it on.
Turning on the microphone would be a good idea. Wow, okay. So, thank you and welcome today to our session. My name is Daniel Noll.
I'm Audrey Scott, and we're the team behind Uncornered Market.
And today we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about? I apologize for all these words being mixed up here. How to use digital storytelling and social media to market your responsible tourism offering. That sounds like a bit of a mouthful, and I think we were also told that this area here is supposed to be a jargon-free zone. So maybe we just start this over again. So today's session is going to be how to tell your responsible tourism story without using the words responsible tourism. Now, I have a favor to ask of all of you before we begin today. Can I ask everyone who happens to be seated to please stand up? Feels good. You can go ahead and stretch out if you like a little bit.
We know it's been a long day, even though it's only 1:30. It's the second day of ITB.
Now, on the count of 3, I would like you all to give the biggest cheer and/or round of applause that you've ever given in your life. Everyone with me? I'm looking into these eyes on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Come on, let's light up this hall. So we just want to just turn the energy around a little bit and let everyone know, the rest of ITB, that Hall 4.1 Responsible Tourism and Adventure Travel is the place to be. You can all go ahead and sit down.
I think it's good to get up and cheer, doesn't it?
Yeah, the thing was, we wanted to get the standing ovation out of the way right up front.
So often people want to know who's talking to you, why they're talking to you. So just briefly, Dan and I are a husband and wife team behind the blog Uncornered Market. A little over 6 years ago, we sold everything and we started to travel around the world. We thought it would take us about 12 or 18 months. As you see, we miscalculated just by a few years. And along the way, we set up our blog Uncornered Market. We started sharing our travel stories. And in the last few years, we've begun working and consulting with tourism boards, travel companies, eco-lodges, and we also have a partnership with a small group company out of Canada called G Adventures, and I see a few of them sitting here, so no pressure right now. But we always traveled with the idea of following your curiosity and respect. Respect for people, respect for local economy, respect for environment. But if you take a look on our blog, we never actually use the words responsible tourism. We never actually use the word sustainable tourism. It just kind of came out. And so last year we were approached by the Global Sustainable Tourism Council and asked to help them promote sustainable tourism without using jargon, helping to use social media, and we started getting more involved with this industry. So that's kind of the background of how we're here.
So, just to give you an idea of where we're going with the discussion today, this is going to be a bit of a lightning strike because we have a relatively short period of time. We'll talk a little bit about marketing responsible tourism and what we believe the problem with marketing responsible tourism is. We're going to talk about storytelling, and this is a subject that could literally take a full day if we really gave its due. We'll talk a little bit about the philosophy, a bit of a business case for it, and then a general approach. We'll talk a little bit about social media and the connection between that and storytelling, and then finally we'll talk about a couple of examples or case studies. If you happen to hear something interesting today, and we really hope that you do, please feel free to go ahead and tweet it. Our handle on Twitter is the letter U Market, and the hashtags that we're running today are RT Clinics and ITB Berlin. So I've got another question for you, and I'm not going to ask you to stand up and give us a standing ovation. What I'd like to know is, what business are we in? And by a show of hands, how many people here believe that they are in the travel business? Okay, so good, a few hands. Now for those of you who didn't put your hand up, please feel free to go ahead and shout. What business are you in? If you're not in the travel business, what are all you non-travel people doing here at ITB Berlin? I heard experience business, that's good. Anything else?
Anyone else?
All right, so we got trumped on experience business, but I'm also going to submit that all of us here, to the extent that we are selling something and selling travel products and experiences, we are ultimately in the inspiration business. And then beyond that, and I think this is really something important for those of us in responsible and sustainable tourism, I think we're also in the differentiation business. The idea is there's lots of beautiful photos out there, and think about it. I once saw a photo and I liked it on Facebook, and it was of a beautiful beach and a beautiful sunset. And the deal is there was a guy right next door to the lodge who had posted that beautiful sunset, who the next day posted the same photo. And the question is, what's the difference between your beautiful sunset and beach photo and the guy right next door who has access to the same beach? And the difference is the experience behind that beach and behind that photo and the story that you're going to tell about it.
So with responsible tourism, we're calling this responsible tourism problem, but I think it's more the opportunity as well as the challenge. And often when we get into groups like this, everyone here knows what responsible tourism means. Is that correct? But you get outside this little hall and you mention it and people's eyes kind of glaze over and they don't really know what you're talking about. Sometimes they think, oh, it's a way to charge more money. This is something that they want me to pay more for. But this is, I want to go over some statistics from last year where it said that 33% actually do care about environmentally and social responsibility in travel. But of that, only about 8% are actually willing to pay anything more for it. Another statistic is that 22% say that sustainability is something that's really important to them, but only about a third are actually going to book a sustainable tourism holiday. So the question to you is, how can you market yourselves in such a way that you're marketing your experiences as something that is fabulous and wonderful? You're not just marketing the responsible tourism, because what people are willing to pay for is a fabulous experience or a great experience they're not going to get anywhere else. So that's going to kind of form the basis. And another thing is, if you think about triage, you have some people who are never in a million years going to book anything that has responsible or sustainable tourism next to it. They're going to go for the cheapest trip, all-inclusive, buffets out the wazoo. You're not going to reach those people. And then you're also going to have a group who love anything that has eco-responsible, green, anything with a certification. And they're going to love everything that has those terminologies. You need to make sure that you keep those as loyal customers. But the huge majority is in the middle. People who could go either way. So the question is, how can you get your story across and bring them in and get them as your customers? That's the huge mainstream middle.
The other general problem I think everyone in marketing and sales faces, and particularly in tourism, is the idea that your average prospective customer is enduring over 6,000 messages a day. So the question is, in the midst of those 6,000 messages, in the midst of all those beautiful photos, how are you going to communicate your product and your experience in the midst of all that? Again, think back to that beautiful sunset beach photo. How is yours different than the guy next door? And we believe that the answer is storytelling. And again, this is a really long, deep topic, and we're just going to try to cut through the top of it. Storytelling helps us cut through the noise and helps us plant the idea and seed of an idea of an experience in a prospective customer's head. And one of the reasons that storytelling is so effective is that information that's presented in the context of a story is more effective and is retained by the human brain differently than just all these advertising messages. The other thing is storytelling, we believe, does something that we call delivers depth of impression. In digital and online marketing, everyone talks about page impressions and gets really excited about it. But the deal is this, with all of the photos that we see and with all the messages that we see, how is that idea going to be planted in our head so we can take action on it a couple weeks down the road, a couple months down the road, or even a couple years down the road? Storytelling helps do that because it delivers this depth of impression in the human brain. Also, storytelling is a differentiator. Again, is the idea to compete on things like price, like a commodity, or is the idea to try and set your travel product and your travel experience apart and differentiate it? Telling effective stories is going to help do that. So the goal is to plant the seed, to help change people's minds and shift their perception, particularly about what responsible tourism in all of its dimensions means. And so the idea is to tell a good story. Through the telling of that good story, you're building a relationship with the customer, building trust, building a level of trust with the idea that you're going to separate them from their cash and they're going to buy your travel experience.
Now often, people say storytelling, this is a lot of jargon, there's a lot of marketers out there that use it. And when we work with clients, we'll say, tell us your story. And they'll kind of get going and then we'll say, okay, well, that's not really a story. What you just gave us was a list of amenities, how many rooms you have and how many places you're going to visit on that trip, or perhaps a list of activities. And that's not really a story. They're not putting the person in there. No offense to PR people, but when we talk with clients, we'll say, can you tell us your story? And they'll send us a press release. That's not really a story that's going to tell what you're doing and why you're doing it. And again, statistics. I know a lot of us have done some really great things where we've saved a whole bunch of water and we're helping X percentage of the community. Those numbers go past people. Unless you show what's really happening behind those numbers, they're not going to be retained. And perhaps most importantly, storytelling is not about making things up. This is not about sitting and telling children's fairy tales. Storytelling actually, especially in this industry, could be the ultimate kind of buster of brainwashing. The more transparent you are, the more stories you tell, the more people actually begin to trust. So we're going to go into a little more what is story now that we've gone over what is it.
Just sort of a basic operating definition of what story is. It's basically an account or a telling of an experience. So it's essentially what happened. Again, not those things on the previous page where that photo of my grandmother with a stop sign was. Also, the other thing is when we've worked with clients, they say story. Wow, that sounds kind of daunting and frightening because it sounds like something that needs to be long form. You can tell a story in 140 characters on Twitter. You can tell a story in 1,400 characters in the course of a paragraph or two on Facebook, and you can also tell it in the form of a blog post or an article or a long book. And if experience is the thing that we're trying to communicate, and this is our currency, then storytelling is the bank account from which we can draw to make the connection to our prospective customers.
So a few storytelling kind of components and techniques. The first word, or the first title of this was called Show, Don't Tell. And the whole idea about this is, don't tell me that you're saving the world, don't tell me that you're saving the community, don't tell me what you're doing. Show me, give me examples of everything that you're doing, and don't just talk at people. Bring them into the story, which gets into the characters. A lot of people don't realize how many great characters there are in their travel experiences. And it's not just the people in the communities, it's not just the travelers. Think of all the staff and why they're there, why they're working for you, what are the values that they share with you. Another one is crux and conflict. I don't know how many times that we've gone to a place expecting one thing, and then our expectations have taken us somewhere else. That's actually a good thing. If it's always kind of happy and smiley and great all the time, it actually becomes a really boring story. So think about what are the crux. People go into a country with expectations. Here we've got Egypt. A lot of people think it's dangerous and kind of shady. We were met with a bunch of really friendly youths, and it formed a really interesting story.
The beautiful thing about effective storytelling is it takes our prospective customer and actually places them deep inside the actual experience. This photo was taken in the South Island of New Zealand on a recent trip that we took in Doubtful Sound. And we woke up early one morning around 5 in the morning and we set off on our kayaks. And the picture doesn't really communicate that aspect of it, but the sort of backstory was we pushed away from the shore, and the next thing we know, our kayaks are surrounded by 2 New Zealand fur seals that are playing and sort of kissing in the water. And the idea is, with this backstory, communicating a little bit more depth to the photo in terms of our emotional connection to the experience, an emotional connection to the place that we're visiting, and the land and the environment. Also, when we work with clients, they'll say, story, how do I get started? Well, one of the things that we'll tell them is tap into the multiple dimensions of the experience. And by dimensions, what do we mean? Things like people, food, landscape, nature, and culture. And the other thing is tap into the multiple senses. So tell me, behind that photo or in that story, what did it look like? What did it feel like? What did I hear while I was out in the kayak at 5 in the morning? What did it smell like, for example? And then combine those. That's how we bring customers deep into the experience. The other thing, for those of you in the responsible and sustainable tourism community, let's focus also on the pillars of responsible and sustainable tourism. So the idea of not only preserving the environment, but also the aspects of culture and the people and the local economies that we're affecting as well. And finally, this is the beautiful thing about storytelling. Storytelling not only helps us communicate what the ultimate travel product or travel experience, but how that travel experience is being delivered to the end customer. And ultimately, this is sort of a great story that we have to tell. Why, as companies, are we delivering the products that we're delivering the way that we're doing it? It's a real missed opportunity to me. We had a discussion yesterday with a woman from an eco-lodge in southern India. And we sit down and she's going through all these beautiful photos in her iPad, and I'm thinking, wow, this looks like a really beautiful place, but what makes this place any different from any other eco-lodge with great sorts of nature and beautiful places and probably spectacular food? And I asked her, and I said, could you please tell me why this eco-lodge was built? And this is the difference between brochureware and actually getting someone into the experience. You're giving them some background. And the idea is we're not selling by drive-by. This isn't just selling one product at a time. It's about developing a deep relationship with our customer through a set of shared core values. That's the why.
Now, to get started with storytelling, we kind of thought we would take you through a little bit of a case study. And it's really quite simple, kind of the who, what, where, why, and how. So imagine you're in Bangladesh, a little village in the north, and we spent a couple days with a family. As you see here, you've got 3 generations together. Me with the daughter, Shanti, who was studying political science at university. So that's the who. And the who is not just the family we're staying with. It's not me as a traveler, but it's all the other people involved in the organization that's actually starting it and running it. And why is it important? Because of the interactions that we had here on the stay, their parents are using the money to keep Shanti in school. And we get to go around and we get to learn from the mother how to cook Bangladeshi food. We're actually spending more time with the family and learning what life is like. And we get to see also the community, go into the schools and see what they're doing, interact with the kids. And if you talk with people, they'll come back with photos of beautiful beaches and beautiful landscapes. But I bet most likely the stories they're going to carry closest to the heart are the ones with the human connections, the ones that they're meeting people, the ones that they're learning, and it's the share back and forth. And often these are the stories that got glossed over. And how can this impact a traveler's experience? I can tell you that in the 5.5 weeks we spent in Bangladesh, the 2 nights we spent with this family was the best time of our lives. We went and looked for tigers in the Sundarbans, we went and bicycled through tea plantations, and all this was wonderful. But this is an experience that I'll never be able to recreate and that we'll never be able to find in a glossy brochure. It only comes through in a story, and that's kind of the challenge for you, is how can you bring this out and bring the traveler into that experience and want it for themselves.
So what's the ultimate connection between storytelling and responsible tourism, and why is it important? I think the idea is to focus on marketing the travel experience first. I think one of the temptations in a niche market like this is to use tags like responsible tourism and sustainable tourism, and then in the process, somehow the consumer, the end customer, gets lost. So the idea is to market the aspects and dimensions of the experience first, and then show why travelers will benefit by choosing that responsible tourism experience because of all those dimensions. I think there's a temptation to say, let's go and sell responsible or sustainable tourism because there's some kind of moral imperative. We should be doing it because it's good for us. No, we should be doing this and we should be tempting prospective customers because the experiences are rich and they involve local communities and they involve good things like trying to save the environment and doing things in a way that preserves and conserves. The whole feel-good dimension is really just sort of a special sauce or sort of special ad here. The other thing from a marketing and sales standpoint that's interesting is when you bring travelers and stakeholders into this, the content that gets generated is especially interesting and can be used to market your responsible or sustainable tourism offering. And then finally, and I think a lot of people in this community this should resonate with, effective storytelling is the ultimate greenwash killer. You cannot fake good storytelling. You can say that you're going to save the world, that you're saving the environment, that you're doing good things for the community, but if you can't demonstrate to the end customer how you are doing that through effective stories, let's just say you're not doing it at all.
Now, we don't have a lot of time here for social media, but fortunately, we actually had a session before this on social media. And also, if you're interested, we're going to be speaking on this more on Saturday at 11 a.m. in hall 7.1, I think. But how many of you are using social media to market? Okay. And how many of you find it an effective marketing tool? Not quite as many. So in this slide, there's just a couple of things I wanted to point out. And these statistics are from last year, so you could probably imagine that they're only going to increase. But in the United States, and so this might be a rather high percentage, but it's growing elsewhere as well, 52% of people use social media for their summer vacation inspiration. And of that, Facebook and TripAdvisor were the highest places where they looked. And then there's another statistic that I find really interesting, which is also 52% of travelers actually change their travel plans based on something that they saw on social media. So imagine that you've booked Ecolodge X over here, and their friend just came back from a trip, posted all these great stories of Ecolodge Y just down the street. People are actually changing their plans based on what they're seeing on social media. And it's not just what their friends are seeing, but it's about the brands that they're following, as well as the bloggers that they're following. So again, this is also an opportunity for all of you, in that when you do have your customers and your travelers out there, ask them to share what they're experiencing and what they're doing, because that's going to come back to you as well.
So before we jump into some of the case study examples, just a thought on some words and some jargon. In the Stone Age of the internet and internet development, some really smart guy said that content was king. And then someone came along just a little while later, a little smarter than that first person, it was probably a woman, who said that context was queen. Well, I think we can probably all recognize that in today's digital online marketing revolution, where social media is coming to the fore, that content without the context is like the emperor not having any clothes. Context is coming first, and content is coming second. Hopefully through some of these examples we can demonstrate that.
Oh gosh, we work on Macs, and they didn't really tell us that we couldn't use our Macs, so we apologize for all the font problems here. So Hosteling International. How many of you know of Hosteling International? Okay, a few of you. I have to admit, when I think Hosteling International, I think cheap accommodation, hostels, youth, and everything else. And when we were working with GSTC last year, they wanted us to put together a group of kind of sustainability stories, sustainability in action. And so Hosteling International sent us this photo, and I thought, great, it's a group of kids partying in Chicago. What am I going to do with this? And they didn't send any context. So I went back and I started asking my questions. Who are these people? What's going on? Why are they in Chicago? And it turns out the story is actually really interesting. After September 11th, Hosteling International recognized that there's a divide between the Middle East and the Western world in terms of youth communicating with each other and cultural exchange. So they set up every year Respect, I think it's called IOU Respect Conference, and they bring together people from all over the Middle East and Europe and the United States together for about 2 weeks, where they can work together and work on projects and develop these bonds. So all of a sudden, this group photo that looks like a bunch of kids partying in Chicago actually takes on a much bigger and better meaning, and it also tells me something about the organization that I would have never known before.
So the next example comes from Ecolodge on the Pacific coast of Nicaragua called Morgan's Rock, that we had the good fortune to visit and do some advisory and consulting work for at the end of last year. This is a photo, boy, it doesn't really communicate really well. It's a photo of a sloth. How many people here have seen a sloth? All right, they don't do a whole lot. Sort of big, hairy, bear-looking like things. They're relatively light. One happened to be climbing on one of the trees while we were at this eco-lodge. When we were doing marketing work for Morgan's Rock, we asked for a bunch of photos, and they gave us the photos, and we said, look, what's the story behind these? And the interesting story of Morgan's Rock was 30 years ago, the land where the eco-lodge was essentially cleared. It was flat. It was for grazing, it was for cattle farming, and there was a railroad that was planned to be built through it. Well, when the Paulson family, who owns Morgan's Rock, came in, they actually reforested the entire area. And one of the results of this reforestation was that all these animals ended up coming back. So land birds came back, seabirds came back to the estuary, a number of different species of monkeys came back, sloths, and other sorts of furry animals. And in terms of the experience for the traveler, you know, we would wake up in the morning, walk over a suspension bridge, and there would be howler monkeys overhead before we were going to breakfast. And in terms of dinner, we'd be sitting on the veranda, and the next thing we know, a couple of sloths would walk by, and there were all sorts of animals around us. It was almost like a safari in situ. So the idea was, here was something, a cleared piece of land that was reforested, the animals came back, and that's something that ultimately affected the traveler's experience.
And our last quick case study comes from G-Adventures, and you can't read it, but it says Cambodia. And last year when we were at the Global Sustainable Tourism Council's annual meeting, Bruce Puntik, who's the founder of G-Adventures, focused on what we feel is kind of the most fun or interesting part of responsible tourism, which is the people, the human connections, the local economy. And he told a story about how when they offer tours to Southeast Asia, to Cambodia and Thailand, when they're in Siem Reap, the travelers go to the New Hope, which is a restaurant, but it's also an NGO that's working in the community. And so all the money that goes from the G-Adventures travelers having the lunch at the restaurant goes to health projects, school projects, and everything else. And what I found really interesting is he said, you know, when these travelers are coming back, they've been in Southeast Asia for maybe 5-6 weeks, they've gone to Angkor Wat, and they've seen all these amazing beaches, and they've gone into jungles, and they've done all these great things. And yet at the top of their feedback forms, when they ask, what was your most memorable experience? It's lunch with the Cambodian kids at New Hope. And so it's the idea that sometimes there is beauty in the ordinary. Sometimes there's things that we don't really realize. We think of as, oh yeah, we're going to organize a lunch and people are going to get together. But again, it's those human connections. And if you can tap into those human connections and those stories behind it, it can be a really powerful story to help show why what you're doing is perhaps different from your neighbor and from what other your competitors are doing. So as you said, we don't have a lot of time with social media, but often we get questions about how do I keep up with content? How do I leverage content? What can I do with content? And so we use this example that often with one piece of content, and again, you can ask your customers and everyone who's your staff members, anyone who's working with you to contribute content. So here we have a photo taken with Dan's iPhone. I mean, imagine him on a boat in New Zealand, snapping his iPhoto.
That's all I pretty much did throughout the course of New Zealand, is go like this.
Yeah, so he's got an iPhone photo from New Zealand. We upload it immediately to Instagram, which is a social media platform. Automatically it goes to Twitter and Facebook, our Twitter and Facebook pages, and gets a certain amount of interaction and feedback, and people are asking questions. Wow, where is that? What are you doing? G-Adventures, the company whose tour we were on, they share it on their Facebook page, and they also get a bunch of interaction. And then from that, it gets put onto a Pinterest board, which creates a storyboard of our tour through New Zealand. So the idea is it starts with one piece of content and one smartphone photo, and it ends up being repurposed and reused in multiple ways. So it's just an idea of all these tools are free, all these tools are available. It's just getting really creative in how you use social media and how you can start telling the stories, not just with photos, but with the context around it. So again, there's no recipe. You need to experiment, have fun.
So wow, I think we've tried to boil the ocean of storytelling and its impact in responsible tourism, so let's just sort of take a step back and see where we've come. Let's think of it this way: responsible tourism is not a line item. It's not something we can charge more for because it just happens to be there. It's something that we should consider building into our travel products and building into the experience. When we tell stories and market our offerings, let's think about the three pillars of responsible and sustainable tourism: people, culture, socioeconomy, and the environment. Consider using story as a differentiator to show how our product and the way it delivers experience is different from our competitors. And through that, build depth of impression. And if we step back from all of this discussion, storytelling and good storytelling is something that feels good to us as human beings. It's something that's good for our business. And I'm going to make an assumption here about things that are important to all of us in this room. The preservation of the environments that we're working in, the interaction and preservation and advancement of the communities that we're working in terms of the delivery of our travel products, and then also the social economy and the communities that we're working in. The very preservation and advancement of all those things that we care about will depend on how effectively we tell our stories. So, this is a human exercise. Let's hope we continue to have fun. Thank you all for your attention today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, we realize it's a bit challenging here. We've got a lot of stuff to compete with. So, thank you. Feel free to